So Sinequa's been at this for a while. We've started in Europe. Laurent talked a little bit earlier, if you were here, for the award ceremony, and moved into the US. And I've been doing this for a while, but about a year ago, we took a look at all of our customers and sort of the commonalities and the outcomes they were experiencing. And we started to put together kind of a narrative to share with folks about, what does it look like and really how do you do it? How do you get there? So that's what I'm going to share with you, a short version of Sinequa narrative. And not surprisingly, it starts with the untapped potential of your data. As Laurent mentioned, we're a software vendor. We don't bring any data, but we do bring some technology that helps to unlock that potential. And, one thing we can probably all agree on, and I know this because I've been going to some of the sessions and I've been seeing this very popular McKinsey stat, is that there is waste, right? And Dan, colored it for you earlier in very humorous ways. But think about if you play it through a little bit, think about the effect it has on the people. And I love this, this picture of this knowledge worker, right? Notice he's using a pencil and paper to sort of track all the little tidbits of data and content that he's picking up. He's probably working on some sort of sophisticated research. Maybe he's in drug development for a pharmaceutical company. Maybe he's in a manufacturing organization trying to figure out the design of their next great product, right? But we'll talk about cognitive burden. Clearly, having to use that pencil and paper to track everything so that he can later reconcile in his mind, that's part of the waste. And if you play it through, this is a great prediction from IDC in a few ways. It quantifies the issue in terms of hundreds of billions of dollars of productivity benefits, but it also time caps it, right? So less than 2 years from now, IDC is saying there's going to be a $430 billion gap, and it makes you think, you want to be on the right side of that gap. So let's go back to how it all started. It's really about content proliferation. Think about email, for example. I was listening to a podcast recently, and they were talking about, Intel decades ago trying to decide, should we unleash email? Should we roll out email to, and this was Andy Grove thinking at the time, well, yeah, I mean, it'll reduce if we roll out this technology, this email technology, it will bring communication that's happening in days down to minutes or perhaps seconds. Think about so he was thinking very positively. I doubt that most of us think about email quite as positively today as Andy Grove did back then. But it's causing this content proliferation, and it's in repositories, it's in the communication way beyond email, as Dan talked about, and it's squirreled away in the business applications, of course, that we use for specific purposes within our organizations. And this is compounded, and think about your organization for a minute. This dynamic of hoarding, I think, exists everywhere. It's particularly bad in large organizations and particularly bad in data-intensive organizations. And we're doing it for all kinds of good reasons. Maybe deleting content gives us anxiety, right? We may think we're going to need it someday. Maybe we don't have the systems for deciding what to curate or what to get rid of. And digital storage is so cheap now that it's easy to hoard it. But what happens is we create duplicates, we create versions that become outdated quickly, and we create a lot of noise and the signal gets lost. And then, of course, the content's constantly changing. Updates are occurring, content's being deleted, content's being added, new data sources are coming online. Think of a merger or an acquisition scenario. That's probably the most intense case where each organization is having the data sources coming online from the other organization, right? And then, of course, people are coming into the organization, they're leaving, they're changing roles, and that's changing their access. So it's a moving target, this content. And it's currently used for validation, I think we can agree, but that validation is only as good as its interpretation. I think of our knowledge worker with the pencil and paper, right? He's going to go look at that at some point when he's finished with his research and now try to interpret what he learned. And I think it basically looks like this. Let's say you're in the course of your work and you come up with a question or a query. This happens every day. And in order to make a data-driven decision, You have to find the data that's relevant to the query and then interpret it to resolve the query. Well, the problem with this is there's no way to know the completeness and the accuracy of what you find in any reliable way. And I love this quote from Warren Buffett because it not only highlights his notoriously poor diet, but it really highlights the danger of making a purely data-driven decision, right? This is not why 6-year-olds have a low mortality rate. So what if you had help connecting the dots? So at Sinequa, what we believe and what we spend all of our time thinking about is how to bring some level of automation, how to automate what's automatable. And it turns out that package technology today does exist to address this problem. And this is kind of the value proposition, graphically rendered, where you've got the data and the content sort of floating around on the left. You know, think about it in all its different formats and all its different digital homes, being processed into information, being connected along topical lines, being enriched with all the intricacies of language. You know, what do idioms mean and what do acronyms expand out to in different domains, right? So that's the process that really leads to information being more than just data and more than just content. It's all about the context of the information that's being presented. So the information-driven paradigm looks more like this, where you've got the content and the data flowing in from all the sources being considered, being processed information, preserving that context, enriching that data, and then augmenting human intelligence, which could mean better service in a call center, could mean faster time to market for new inventions, new drugs, new products, what have you. This is what we mean when we talk about becoming information-driven. And there are 3 things that we tell customers to consider these days. You know, as Laurent mentioned earlier during the award ceremony, we've been here for 10 years and a lot's changed. And customers are coming to us, they may not have an information access solution in place, or maybe they have something that they consider you know, getting older, longer in the tooth. So we tell them, well, look at cognitive. Cognitive technologies have clearly emerged as a critical means for workers to get actionable information. The way I look at it is cognitive represents the first time that we've been able to bring computing power squarely into the human space to help us with our tasks, to understand natural language, and to learn from curated content and really reverse engineer business logic. The second thing we tell them is look for a complete solution. You don't want to be in a situation in knowledge management where you have to go out and find a point solution every time a new business requirement comes up, or a new use case, or a new idea, or a new path. You want something that can grow and be able to cover multiple use cases, multiple different business ideas over time. And the last thing we tell them is go with something proven. There are a lot of edge cases and corner cases, as most of the people in this room probably know. You want to look for technology that's been through that, and you want to look for a vendor that has an agile software development process that can take the experience they have with those edge cases and those corner cases and build and productize the solution and build that back into their platform. And really, every customer gets the benefit of that over time if you go with a proven solution. All of this works to reduce the cognitive burden. So what is the cognitive burden, okay? The cognitive burden refers to the extra thought and effort that we require as humans to evaluate all the available options and make optimal decisions, right? When we load our minds with confusing choices, what was the stat earlier? We have an 8-second attention span, and not even as good as a goldfish. So we experience cognitive burden as individuals, and organizations experience a cognitive burden in aggregate. It's proportional to the number of knowledge workers and the weight of each knowledge worker's cognitive burden while they're doing their work. So we get to the how. How can you reduce the cognitive burden? Well, this is Sinequa's mission. Our mission is to power the information-driven economy by helping to alleviate the cognitive burden at the organizational level. And there are capabilities out there that I'll introduce. So this is the current state of the enterprise, right? This is our friend from the earlier slide with the pencil and paper that's going out there looking at raw data and content and trying to get to actionable information, right? There's a lot of human interpretation there. And there's really a lack of confidence as to how much of the information or the data that you're getting to when you tackle this task. But it turns out there are areas of automation, which I'll walk you through briefly, that can mitigate that. Notice that we're not taking the human interpretation out of the loop. It's still there, it's just managed. It's minimized in some cases, and you're effectively shrinking the cognitive burden for the individual and for the organization. So let's start with content. When we talk about content, we're talking about the ability to access all the different places where the content lives, all the different repositories, the communication forums, and the different business applications that are out there. We're also talking about content in different formats. There are hundreds of formats ranging from database tables to PDF documents to Office documents, you name it, right? So being able to get to the content and then make sense of it as you're considering it, that's what we mean by content, and a lot of that can be automated today. Once we get a handle on the content, now we have to figure out how do we automate the interpretation? How do we decipher meaning? And this is a pretty good example. I think there's some text on the right, and as you start to take this text through these steps, you figure out, well, what language is it in? It's in US English, right? What are the different parts of speech? Let's start to deconstruct the actual text and figure out what are the root words. And what are the concepts? You have to be able to extract the different concepts in there to figure out what this might mean. And that includes named entities, people, places, lots of clues in there, email addresses, phone numbers, things like that. Text mining agents, by that I'm just referring to the ability to automate the detection of these special patterns, whether it's a license plate number, a date, financial amount. And then finally, co-occurrences, maybe the most important part where we talk about one thing acting on another thing. That really speaks to meaning, and to the extent that you can detect those and start to semantically tag those and expand those out, you can really start to automate the meaning or the interpretation of the meaning. And of course, it doesn't always happen in a single platform. There are a lot of vendors out there. My old employer, IBM Watson, has a very impressive set of APIs for interpreting content along personality lines, sentiment. Google's doing it, Microsoft's doing it. There are specialty vendors like SciByte out there doing it. So the ability to integrate with those services and capitalize on all those investments that are happening outside of a single vendor space is really important. That's one of the things we tell our clients. You have to assume innovation happens elsewhere and be able to leverage it as you're enriching and connecting your content. Next is learning. So there's been a lot of talk this week about AI and specifically machine learning. There are some very robust algorithms out there for things like clustering and classification. In order to become information-driven and stay that way, you need a system that can accelerate the path, right, by using machine learning to develop models based on curated content. But then you also want a system that can start to monitor user behavior and figure out, well, why are these users, why are these experts interacting with the system, and how are they interacting with the system, and then use that to scale their expertise across the organization, even to the folks that haven't been around as long. And that's really a key role of machine learning. From a platform perspective, that means integrating with the popular platforms out there like Spark and TensorFlow, and providing tool support so that even the citizen data scientist, right, the data scientist who's not as well versed in R and Python, can approach these tools and use them in an admin-friendly way. And finally, none of that would be worth anything if you didn't have a way to present the capabilities, whether it be to an end user using a user interface framework or to a developer with intuitive APIs. So presentation is key. the flexibility to configure applications that align with user goals, and track the business, track your knowledge management problems over time so that your organization isn't left going out and building point solutions. So just to kind of wrap that up, this is what it looks like. When you build it all out, you've got areas of automation that reduce the cognitive burden, reduce the human interpretation, and really start to unlock the business value of information, which accelerates innovation, which drives efficiency. We've got customers out there using technology in ways that we never thought of, which is really how we formed this narrative. So I'll leave you with a few words about Sinequa. Again, I'll encourage you to come to our booth to talk more. But as Laurent mentioned during the award ceremony, we are an independent software vendor. We use a lot of natural language processing and machine learning technology in our platform. And we have the broad connectivity to lots of different enterprise resources out there. We've been proud to receive accolades from the big analysts out there, as well as recently as this morning, the Promise Award from KM World. And these are just a few of the customers that trust Sinequa to work with us, to work with them, rather, to become information-driven as a trusted partner. So thanks for your time, and enjoy the rest of the conference.